Welcome to our Tuesday, I think today is Tuesday Live. I have a real special guest on today. Listen, as you guys know, if you've been watching me the last few days, I am definitely under the weather. I don't know how long I'm going to hold out. Appreciate your patience. But Joe Kerr is with me today, and we're going to be talking about many different things, including how to devalue a currency. We're going to be talking about a $2 quadrillion problem. And also this one, 7 reasons why people will surrender pretty much all to the World Economic Forum and the rest of these globalists. So please welcome Joe Kerr. Joe, great to have you back again.
Tom, good to be back on the show. Thanks for having me on.
It's going to be a delight. So you get to explain some things. I don't think a lot of people are familiar with some topics. Some are derivatives, for example. We're going to talk about crypto theft. I'm going to have you walk through things and then get to the 7 reasons why people will willingly surrender pretty much everything to these globalists. But let's start here.
They will.
Let's work through it. How do you devalue a currency, and why would something like that take place? And do we see that going on now?
Well, the US dollar is the reserve currency for the world. Everybody's debt is denominated in dollars. So you can go to any country and have your currency converted from dollars to the local currency if you travel, but they would actually prefer that you give them dollars because the dollar is worth more. And so the dollar is the denomination that most world debt is calculated in. And in order for the World Economic Forum, the World Bank, any of the globalists, like you mentioned, in order for them to bring about a world economy, which we know from Revelation is going to happen, you have to get rid of the reserve currency that's owned by one nation, because that doesn't work with a one world government. So in order to do that, you have to get rid of the US dollar. Well, how do you get rid of the reserve currency for the entire world? And it's 3 C's. You cripple it, confiscate it, or crash it. Cripple it would be to take down the U.S. economy, meaning to take down their stock market, to get the run on the banks where all the banks had to close, something like that. But that is a huge scale operation to take down an entire country's financial system. So then you go to number 2. If you can't cripple it, then what do? Well, then you confiscate the wealth. If, I don't know that you have listeners old enough to remember that, but in 1933, FDR confiscated all of the gold. He just made an edict and said, you have to turn it in. Well, some people willingly did. Some people were guilted into it. He called them hoarders because they were hoarding the gold. And when the executive order came out, he actually said to return it to the government as if it belonged to them. It was the people's gold. They owned the coins, but he wanted them to return it to the government. And of course, anybody who resisted was called out and guilted into giving it up. And the ones who wouldn't give it up, it was eventually confiscated. But confiscating it is one way to do it. Now, that's kind of a difficult ask, because if you were to consider just the amount of currency and coin, U.S. actual printed money that's in circulation, if you counted everything from the money in people's safe in their house to the pocket change in your wallet to the bags of money in banks, you're looking at about $7 trillion of fiat currency that's in dollar denominations that's in circulation right now. That would be pretty hard to confiscate all of that, because some people wouldn't give it up. Some of it, they don't even know where it is, so that'd be difficult. Plus, when we use the word cash, we're actually talking about 4 categories. There's, according to the U.S. government and the U.S. Bank and the Fed and all those, they refer to it in the 4 M's. There's M0, M1, 2, and 3. M0 is what I'm describing right now. All of the liquid convertible cash that you could walk into a grocery store and buy a loaf of bread with it. Okay. There's also M1, 2, and 3. Those are other assets that can be converted to cash. In other words, your 401k, for example, can be converted to cash. If you have a mutual fund, at some point, it has to be converted to cash. You can't go into the bank and say, I want to withdraw $100 from my mutual fund. It doesn't work that way. Mutual fund is a completely different financial instrument. But eventually, it can be converted to cash, just not easily. But your credit card or your check account or something like that, you can walk into your bank with a debit card, and in 30 seconds with a teller at the counter or in a drive-through, you can convert a plastic debit card into $100 bills. It's easily transactable. There are other kinds of currency, what we call money, that are not easily convertible, things like bearer bonds and debt that is transmitted between financial institutions. So there's all different kinds of things that we call money. You can imagine, just from that description, to confiscate all of that would be almost impossible, because your 401k, my 401k, it's not like you have that sitting in a safe somewhere. You can't go to your bank and they point to your box and there, your 401k is over there. It doesn't work like that. It's all digital. You can get your money from your 401k, but it's not easily converted into cash. So to confiscate all of the money would be, again, almost impossible. So you go to C number 3, which is crash it. You have to completely devalue it to zero by crashing the stock market, runs on all the banks, and convert everything that is in circulation, basically reduce it to zero. Make it so that nobody wants cash. Well, how do you do that? That's another question, another conversation. We'll, get into that a little bit later, but there is a bunch of money that is not easily accessible. Money in the stock market, money in derivatives. You brought that up. We'll talk about that as well, and what that is and why that's a big problem. But when you're talking about currency, cash, money that we think of when we think of money, talking about $7 trillion. But the big payoff, the money that they have to get in order to crash the entire economy, is all of the derivative money, all of the futures and options contracts and things that support the money behind the money, the vehicles that banks use to transact. And that is a lot more money.
Okay. So I want to ask you about derivatives here in just a second. But if people want to get a hold of you, follow the things you write, where you speak or whatever, how can they do that? Or can they?
If they want to see what I write, most of what I publish, I've written some things for Jan Markell's site. I've written most they would be able to find on Harbinger's Daily.
Okay, on Harbinger's Daily. Okay, great.
I am a ghostwriter, so I don't have a website or anything for obvious reasons.
Yeah, I've seen you on Harbinger's. Okay, with derivatives, I've heard about derivatives for a number of years, mainly because of my dad talking about them when I was younger, growing up, and the huge problem that they're going to become one day. Can you explain to people what derivatives are? Because you said that's where the real deal is.
That's the big payoff. There is currently tied up in derivative values, and it's hard to even wrap your head around this, but right this minute, about $2.6 quadrillion.
Quadrillion.
What's quadrillion? I mean, a quadrillion is 1,000 trillion.
Okay, this is far. So
there's
far
$2,500 trillion. In other words, if you had that money, you could pay off the national debt 600 times. Okay, and we owe $33 trillion right now. So it's an immense amount of money behind all of the money. But all of that is tied up in futures and options contracts.
Okay, it's futures and options, derivatives, breaking it down into layman's terms. It's investments, it's what?
It is, let's see, what's the easiest way to describe it? An option contract or a futures contract is a guarantee to do something in the future. It's not worth anything right now.
It's not worth anything. Wow.
It is, for example, when I worked Wall Street, I worked with a lot of the commodities companies. And one of our big clients was Folgers, the coffee company. Because when people think of commodities and things being traded, they usually think of a few things. They know about a few basic commodities that are traded. They know about pork bellies, and maybe they've heard about coffee or sugar or cocoa. But you can trade futures contracts on cheddar cheese and bacon and lumber and all kinds of things are traded as futures contracts. The reason Folgers was one of our customers was because in order for them to guarantee how much it was going to cost them to produce cans of coffee, like you would go to the store and buy a can of Folgers coffee, they have to be able to control the price of that. So because prices change on coffee supplies all the time, it's literally traded every day. So the price goes up and down all the time. In order for them to lock in a price so they know what their cost is, because you can't run a business if you don't know what the product you're producing costs to make, because you have to know how much your profit margin is to sell it down the road. So in order to guarantee themselves a set cost, they buy what's called a futures contract. In other words, they go to a company that represents 100 coffee growers, and they say, right now, coffee is going for, and we're going to make up the numbers here, but coffee is going for $100 for a 50-pound bag. That's the current price. Now, next year, it might be $150. And Folgers can't wait until next year to find out what they're going to sell it for to make it next year, because it takes them 6 months from the coffee grower to production on a coffee, can on the shelf in Kroger's. So they have to be able to lock in that cost. So what they do is buy a futures contract. They say, we will pay you, we will give you $1,000 if you will guarantee us that anytime for the next year, we can come and buy that bag of coffee for $100. It costs them $1,000 to make that deal. But if the price goes up to $150, they still get to buy it for $100 because that's what the contract says. It's kind of like putting escrow down on a house. You're making a guaranteed deal that you can buy it for the set price that's on that contract for a certain period of time. If you go beyond that time, price can change. Now, obvious question, well, what if the cost of coffee goes down and it's not $100 a bag, it's $75 a bag? Why would they pay $100 a bag? They don't. They just lose the $1,000 for the contract and they go buy it for $75 a bag. That's how a futures contract works. It's basically an agreement for a future transaction.
Very interesting.
Options are the same thing. And people trade them all day, every day, not just commodities like coffee, sugar, cocoa, beans, soybeans, things like that. They also trade money that way.
Okay. So with that, you look at how do you deal with this problem? The U.S., the petrodollar is basically the money that's exchanged, not worldwide, but pretty close to it. It's controlling just about everything. So to crash that, in order for this global system, thinking World Economic Forum and these globalists, to control everything, got to crash the U.S. economy, got to crash the dollar, really, but then also derivatives. Yes. Now, as you explained, derivatives, 2.6 quadrillion, which I think you said by the end of this year is projected to be as much as 3 quadrillion?
By the end of 2026, if things were to stay on the same trajectory right now, it would be 3.6 quadrillion. That's the estimate.
Okay. Now, if let's just take a figure. Let's just say Klaus Schwab, he's the head of World Economic Forum. At least he's the figurehead, regardless of if he is or not, he's still there. He's the James Bond villain, and he wants to control the economy of the world. So what would be his steps?
From where he is, because he isn't, a direct banker, we know he's pulling the strings behind the scenes. So some of what he would do would just be speculation for you and me, because we don't know just how deep the roots go there. It's one thing to say we know he's behind it, and we see all the people who go to Davos every year, and you look at that list of names, some of those big, corporate CEOs, and Kerry was there this year, right? Our whatever he is, the global climate czar. It's a little mix of everybody. Well, if you're going to try and crash the currency for the U.S., what do you need the climate czar for? What's his function? Why is the CEO of a company that makes microchips? What are they doing there? They can't walk into the World Bank and do something. It's going to be pulling a lot of levers and a lot of strings in a lot of places. That's why you have to have everybody on the same page, which is why they do this wonderful little meeting every year in Davos, Switzerland. And in order to bring that all to a head, You basically have to have all the bad guys on the same page. Bond villains don't operate on their, in this case, you couldn't have just one Bond villain operating on their own. Klaus thinks he's in charge, but there are always people who know more or have more, whether that's more money or more control. He's in the same situation. And ultimately, as Christians, we know that behind all of this is an entity that has no interest in dollars or in money or government. That one is just interested in control, and that's the devil. Yeah. And so it's all about control and worship for him.
Yeah, indeed it is, and he's smarter than all of these other people. I often look at Klaus Schwab as a figurehead and somebody else behind him, but I don't know. You know, I've read some different things which are interesting, but I also read about these bankers, these families. You know, you read about the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers, and you start going back in history, there's some very interesting things. You know, when you start looking at World Economic Forum, you can even look at the UN, you look at the Federal Reserve. Lots of concerns when you start going down that path. I don't know if you have anything you want to say on that. If not, we'll move on. We'll get to these 7 things that people will surrender.
Well, no, there's a whole program behind all of those families, and I think you've covered that. I know Amir and others have talked about the, what do they call them? The Illuminati. I'm not an expert on that one, but I've heard the same stories and rumors that you have. But it is true that there are families, incredibly wealthy people behind many of these, including some of the banks that are named after them, like Lehman Brothers. Some of the biggest banks in the world are still named for the people who founded them. And those families are powerful, but they are behind the scenes pulling the strings.
Yes, they are. Okay, I'm going to ask you about these 7 things. Okay.
Okay.
So let's just get to it. And let me word this correctly so everybody's on the 7 page. 7 reasons why people will willingly surrender all their money to the WEF, World Economic Forum, the Fed, Govan Order, like a Ponzi scheme. And they will even look forward to it.
That is a big claim, and we should put this on the part of the show that has the disclaimer, you know, the one that I have to give that says, I'm not a financial advisor. Don't make any decisions about your money based on anything that Joe says, because he's just an idiot with an opinion, like all the other idiots with opinions. But basically what we talked about first, in order to devalue the U.S. currency, you have to replace it with something. They're going to replace it with a digital currency. Okay, well, that sounds good, but how do you get everybody to convert to the digital currency? How do you get them all to say yes to that? Because you're always going to have, I live in the South. You know where I live. Up until the late 1860s, there were still people holding on to Confederate dollars around here because they were positive the South was going to rise again and their Confederate currency was going to be worth something. Well, it's not, unless you collect it for just collector's items. But in the same way, there will be some people who will insist on holding on to their paper dollars or their coins because they think it's going to be worth something again. The government doesn't know what they're doing. Somebody else will get elected and this will all go away. And look at this jar of $100 bills I got here. I'll be the richest kid on the block. It's not going to work that way because in order to digitize all the assets, you have to convince everybody to switch over. How do you do that? Well, you can issue an order at first that says everybody has to surrender their $100 bills. You know human nature well enough to know that some people will do it just because they were told they had to. There are those people. I'm not one of them. There are others where
make me laugh.
There are others where you can offer them what seems like just this incredible trade. It's ridiculous. Okay, if you will surrender your $100 bills, here's what we're going to do for you, Tom. We're going to give you $1,000 of cryptocurrency for every $100 bill. 1,000. So if you got 10, you just multiplied your money. Aren't you the smartest guy on the block? So some people will go for that. Now, again, cryptocurrency and digital assets are nothing but lines of numbers and code, so they're not actually worth anything. You can't put your hands on them. People have seen the little picture of a Bitcoin, you know, the little coin with a B on it. There is no such thing. There's no such thing as a Bitcoin. It's just digital. So Some of the people will say, well, that sounds great. Why would I turn that down? And they'll say, okay, here's all my $100 bills. And they'll get this little flash drive or something that they can plug into their computer, and it will download right onto their phone. Here's all your digital credits that you can go to the grocery store or the gas station and you can use these. And some people be swindled in that way. Some of them will be coerced, because there'll still be some that'll say, I don't know about this whole digital currency thing. And so they will be swindled by exchange. In other words, they'll kind of be coerced. They'll be told, look, we're going to give you this week $1,000. Next week, it's going down to 50. What? From 1,000 to 50? Yep, it's going down to 50. And then the week after that, it's going down to 20. And the following week, your $100 bills, you might as well just roll them up and use them to light a fire, because they're going to be worthless. When the Civil War was over, the Confederate dollar was worth 3 cents. The same thing will happen when they convert everything to digital. But once you've confiscated all the cash, like we talked about in the first part, then the next step obviously is enforcement, where you have the FBI go door to door and they take what people don't want to surrender, which begs the obvious question, how do they know if I have money sitting somewhere? Well, that's easy, because all of the digital records are already available to banks. They can look at your bank account now and tell how much money you have, and they can see how much you've withdrawn, and they can look at your credit cards and debit card statements and figure out if you spent it all or not. It's really not that complicated. It's pretty simple math if you have the supercomputers to do it.
Now, with that real quick question, with that also, at the same time, you come to a point where you're coerced, then you have the FBI or whoever go door to door. Well, by that time, your currency is not worth anything anyways, so you can't trade with it. Even on a black market, you'd have, the dollars wouldn't do any good, because the dollars couldn't be turned in anywhere at that point.
Exactly. And that's the crucible. That's the tipping point. And the same thing happened when all the gold was confiscated. They were made to feel guilty over it. FDR, called them hoarders. When he took the oath of office, he said, don't worry, the gold standard's not going away. Literally 3 days later, he changed it. And within a month, he had confiscated all the gold. So we are hearing that exact same thing now. Think about the language that's being used out of Washington when we were talking about, different things over the last few years. Well, you have to do this because you're going to kill Granny if you don't. And you guilt some people into doing what you want them to do. Some people, you can pay them off. Wow, look, here's what we're going to do for you. Such a deal for you. I've got over here, right here, this for you. You can con some people, and some people have to be forced. And you're right, there will be a black market. I think that's inevitable. That always happens when you legalize or criminalize something. So there will be some of that. It
will be a black market, but you won't be able to trade dollars in that black market. It'll have to be something else.
It's conjecture. Yeah. I think you probably will for a while, because again, you'll have those hope-driven people who just, they're holding out hope that someday it's going to be worth something again. This will all turn around. Don't worry, it's happened before. It'll blow over. They'll be wrong, but they're hoping.
Because there is a difference when you look at the gold market. If you go back to when gold was confiscated, gold still had value. So people could hide it and hold on to it, and they no doubt did. So it's just an interesting dynamic. And basically everything you're saying is what you have with your paper currency is going to be worth absolutely nothing. Similar to, well, I guess a little bit different, but when you go back to Germany, when their economy was just absolutely collapsed, their paper money was absolutely worthless for a different reason, but nevertheless, that's what you're saying.
The same outcome, yes.
Same outcome.
And when you take away the transactional capability of money, what do you need a bank branch for? Mm-hmm. So we think in terms of, well, I can always walk into the bank and do, they won't even be there. They'll turn them into, who knows what, but there won't be any reason to have a bank on every corner like you have in your small town or your big city, because you won't have any transactional capabilities from going in there. Everything will be done digitally. It'll all be from your phone, or eventually, like we know from Revelation again, it will be done with a mark of some kind, because you can't carry a phone everywhere. People lose their wallets. Their credit cards get torn up. The dog ate my homework. Things happen. And that's perfectly legitimate. And the unbanked parts of the world where there isn't a bank now anyway, remote areas of third world countries where people don't have banking capabilities and they don't have cell phones either. What about those people? How do we take care of them? Well, that's the obvious translation. Well, we got this mark right here. We're just going to put this on your forehead and your hand, and you'll be able to transact just like everybody else. And that will be an easy conversion for some people who've never had a bank and never had access to any of those things. They'll jump at the opportunity. And in all fairness, really and truly, on a purely practical level, that makes sense. There's nothing inherently evil about offering people who've never had the opportunity to have a bank and a savings account and be able to transact, giving them the opportunity to do that. That's not evil inherently, but it will be leveraged and it will be used for evil. And we know that because the Antichrist is going to do it that way.
Yes, you will. There's this question that just came in. I know we have a few more points to get through of your 7. But Gordon asked, everyone that buys gold and silver do not have it physically in their hands, but just on paper. So when everything hits the fan, how do you physically get your gold or silver to use if you can? Will it even be possible? I've wondered about that myself.
The gold and silver companies operate very much like banks do. They aren't required to keep 100% of the inventory on hand. So some people have their gold or silver in their IRA account, for example, and they don't take physical delivery of coins or bars. For the people out there who want to own gold or silver, my only recommendation on that is take possession of the actual metal. Don't just have it in an account in your IRA or something like that. For the limited time when gold is transactable, whether on the black market or otherwise, it will only be so if you have it in hand. So to answer his question, if you are one of those people who believes that gold and silver is going to hold its value, I would say, if you believe that, then you better be holding the gold or silver.
Yeah. I know like Peter Schiff, Robert Kiyosaki, and some others are real big on physical gold and silver. But yeah, I personally question the ability to actually be able to trade with it during that time. I mean, if everything's gone digital, again, you said there will be a black market, so that may be where that's really going to play out too.
That's always been the case when they took away things, even when they legalized things, when some of the states first began to legalize recreational drugs. Oh, well, you don't have to worry. All the illegal drugs will go away because we're going to make it legal. Well, ask the people who live in Colorado, yeah. There's still a black market and it's still active. That didn't fix the problem. The same thing will be true here. But the difference is we've never had a global economy with one world leader before. So some of what we're doing here is purely speculation because we don't have any reference point to say, see, like we do in the stock market. Well, past performance is no guarantee of future results. Well, we don't have any past performance for a one world global leader. So we don't know exactly what's going to happen. And I'm sure there's some of this that we're going to be completely wrong. But what I'm doing right now is just speculating and carrying forward based on what I know is true of the financial markets the way they exist.
Yeah. Very interesting. Okay, we have a couple more of your 7.
Okay. Well, the basically cryptocurrency and digital currencies, and this is Joe's opinion, but from lots of years of experience, anything that only exists in the metasphere isn't real. It can disappear by pulling the plug out of the wall and your internet goes away and it's all gone. If you can't access it by opening a drawer and getting a hold of it, it's not real. And that is the essence of a Ponzi scheme. There's nothing behind it except somebody's reputation. And so somebody can easily pull the plug. So basically, people will do 7 things. You have some people who will follow along because they want to believe in a success story, even a fake one. Not far from you in San Diego, there was a lady a few years back, not too long ago, just in the 2020s, who was the biggest Ponzi scheme by a woman ever in history. She owned a whole bunch of property and did a lot of development in San Diego. But people wanted to be a part of it because she was famous and they wanted to be close to that famous person. They wanted to be able to say, see, I know so-and-so, I got my selfie with this person. There are some people who are drawn into something for the same reason. They want to believe in a success story. Number two, there's some people who are drawn into it because of celebrities or personalities. Remember last year's Super Bowl commercials? This year's Super Bowl commercials, nothing to speak of. Last year, the big ones were Tom Brady and his wife, and they were advertising something called FTX. Yeah. And the guy behind FTX is in jail right now. Well, what happened to all of that? Well, Tom lost about $75 million, which I don't feel too bad for him because he just signed a $375 million contract to be a broadcaster on Fox. So he's not hurting too bad. But that all disappeared overnight. And a lot of big, important people lost a lot. But think how many people they drew into it because, well, where's your money? Oh, same place as Tom Brady. Same place as all all these famous people. There was who is the basketball player? Oh, Steph Curry was also involved in it. Lost about $32 million. So a lot of important people lost a lot of money when that went belly up, but a lot of people got into it because they were swayed by that person. The same thing will be true with the digital currency. They'll do commercials. You can just bet on it. And it'll be the biggest names and the biggest stars. And they'll be saying, just go along. This is good. This is going to be, it's great for the country. This is going to be so good. Be like Bob. Go and get, and whoever the star is that day, they'll use those people. And they will. That's not a leap at all because we know the government uses the, Hollywood right now. That's the big thing. There'll be some people drawn in that way. Others will act based on fear. A lot of your listeners have heard the acronym FOMO, FOMO, fear of missing out.
Yep.
You can drag a lot of people into something just by telling them that one line. You're going to miss out.
You're going to miss out. Hey, you better get this car today. You're going to miss out.
How many taglines on commercial? Yep. Yeah. Still the same in commercials now.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned
operators are standing by. Call now. And that's enough.
Now. You don't want to miss. So, I mean, if just look back in the last few years, celebrities are used for politics to other things that are tied to certain companies, pharmaceutical companies.
Yes.
And you look at the amount of people that the celebrities that are willing to just say anything, like you mentioned Tom Brady and his wife, for FTX, Steph Curry, and others too. So I think you bring up a great point. We've already been programmed, and people will do almost anything if their favorite sports star is saying do it, if their favorite, whoever it is, they'll do it.
That's true. Yeah, I've in my lifetime have been in broadcasting, other things, have been around a few celebrities and know a few people. I'm still on the board of directors for Quentin Aaron's foundation. Quentin, I say that like everybody knows who that is. Sorry, Quentin is the actor who played Big Mike in the movie Blind Side. And after Quentin left Hollywood after that movie, that was back in 2009, he began to go around the country and to talk to schools and talk to kids about bullying and about other things, using his celebrity for a good cause. And I hoped to, book him and do things with him. He's a great guy. Love Q, but I've had the blessing over my career of knowing a few celebrities and a few people I could call up. And if I did and said, hey, I really need you to do this favor for me, I'll compensate you for it, but I just need your face and your name because everybody knows who you are. And they would do it. And some folks too, in California, in a big enough church, and you've been there long enough, you've had some folks who weren't anybody when they came to your church, but they're some big star now. And if you were to call them up and say, hey, I need a favor, they'd do it for you. So some people will act based on that. Some of them it's fear. Then number 4, some people will act on euphoria or elation or exhilaration. Everybody's doing it. Let's get in. And so they will, because it's exciting to be part of the big thing. It's exciting to be part of whatever the big move is.
It's and it's going to be a different sell at certain stages, I think, also with this currency. It's going to be a very exciting thing in the beginning until it gets to this point where they're going door to door.
Yeah, and they'll hide that as much as they can,
Yeah.
and as much as they can control the media, they'll be able to keep it off of the big screen television. Nobody's going to know about the guy whose door got kicked in Podunk Puddle, Idaho, because he was hoarding something that they didn't want him to hoard. You're not going to see that on CNN, but they'll control it to a certain extent. But when it happens down the street from you, there's no way you can hide that. I know when that happened.
Hey, you know what else? People, we've seen the last few years, I can go back to 2020, that whole year of 2020 from March on, people were turning in their neighbors for things, so it's going to happen. People who, family members still don't talk. And so we already see the nature of people.
Well, we
So-
saw that in Matthew 24. Is it
Yes.
24?
Yes,
Yeah,
it is.
where Jesus said that your friends and your relatives will turn against you, and they'll think they're doing God's work.
Yeah.
They'll be convinced of that. There'll be a great commercial campaign to tell them what a good citizen they are if they'll just turn in those people who are dissenters and who aren't willing to go along with what's clearly good for everybody else. Why wouldn't you want to be a part of that?
Hey, we've seen it in the religious community. I mean, I experienced it quite a bit of the pressure to just go along with everything during the last few years. And within the religious community, Joe, there's also, you have a teaching that's post-millennial. There's premillennial, amillennial, and postmillennial. So for all of our viewers, premillennial is the belief that Jesus will come back at the end of the tribulation and establish the millennial kingdom for 1,000 years. Postmillennial teaches we're going to fix the world. We're going to make like a perfect world. After we do that, then Jesus will come back. And the whole thought process of a utopian world feeds right into this religious aspect of this same doctrine. There's a couple of different names of it, but it's an easy thing to fall prey to if you aren't biblically sound.
Wow, that gets the wheels turning in my head, thinking of all the ways that they will sell that, because that is a commercial campaign. I mean, you can make an ad campaign out of that pretty easily.
Oh,
But you show a few big buildings and look at the orphans we're saving, and if you'll just be part of this, all we need you to do is come on board with the digital currency, and it's going to be good for you today. And you can go right by your local wherever and get this taken care of. 30 seconds, you'll be in and out of there, and you'll be part of the in crowd.
the guilt. Don't you care about the orphans? The whole thing. I believe what we've witnessed over the last few years is nothing compared to what is coming when you start looking at this. Because Satan has to get this global system, and he has to get everybody on board that he possibly can. He can't have any dissenters, because in the end, his attempt is going to be to eliminate Jesus when Jesus returns. It's not going to work, but if he doesn't get everybody on board, that's his only hope. I've got to get everybody on board, and we're going to have this massive battle, and we know how that turns out at Armageddon, but this is the direction things are going, and Satan doesn't love anybody but himself. Doesn't love anybody else.
And you know what? Somewhere in the mix of all this, I have a hunch that some of this will catapult to the guns and intrusion and coercion very quickly, because if I know one thing about the enemy, I know that he can't help but be who he is. He's a murderer and a thief and a liar, and it is his nature, which means, and the people like Klaus, to use, the Klaus Schwab and the people around him, the ones who are evil at their core, and I don't want to say that about him. Hopefully God will touch his heart. Somebody will be able to share the gospel with him, and it'll be somebody other than Klaus Schwab that hands all this over. I don't want to wish hell on anybody, but the truth is, those folks will turn on their own just as quickly as they'll turn on somebody who disagrees with them, because anybody that gets in the way of the big plan is disposable. And that will be part of what will catapult world events forward as well, in my opinion, is when they all turn on each other.
Yes, it will. Very interesting. You mentioned this. Tomorrow on the program, I have two individuals from Australia. We're going to be talking about this this group that was blamed for shooting some police officers and said they shot them. They're part of a religious group that's premillennial. They believe Jesus is going to come back and establish a millennial kingdom. It's like this thing has been set up where the real murderers are us. So the whole thing, they're going to coming after the guns. That's tomorrow, assuming that I feel good. Okay, I'm going to be checking out here in just a minute, Joe. I can tell. So
Okay.
Can I just get to a couple of questions?
Sure,
Okay.
absolutely.
Amy asks, how do we respond when they implement this? What do you recommend? That's a good question.
Well, the rapture is right around the corner, and I believe that happens before the one world government is instituted. So we won't be here for some of this. How much of it, I can't guarantee. I hesitate to have these kind of conversations because I have to always tell people I could be wrong, and I have been before. I've turned a little bit of money into a lot of money, and I've magically turned a lot of money into very little money. I am talented in both directions. It's amazing. But what to do right now, beyond what we said about the gold, I would say make sure that you have a few months of living expenses in cash at your house, literal physical cash, because as long as it's transactable, you need to have some, and you won't be able to go get it from the bank teller machine when all of that shuts down. So that's a good idea to always have some basic supplies to take care of you and your family. But that messy period in between when this all, as your reference, hits the fan and when the rapture happens, we don't have that exact timing.
We don't. In fact, that goes with the next question from S. Mapes. Do you think digital means mark of the beast or not necessarily? I think the system has to be in place first before it becomes mark of the beast. There's certain things that have to happen before the mark of the beast is implemented. There has to be an antichrist, for one thing. There has to be a false prophet. There has to be an image of the beast. Daniel chapter 7, verse 24, there has to be 10 kings before there's an antichrist. So there's certain things that have to take place, but Joe, we don't really know if we hear about digital currency, CBDCs, but the assumption that someone like me makes is, yes, this is the perfect tool to bring about the mark of the beast, but it could still morph into something even more oppressive, couldn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I'm old enough to know, to remember when they made the same claim about credit cards. Oh, don't get credit cards. Credit cards are the mark of the beast. You won't even have real money in your pocket. You mean you're going to trust a piece of plastic? So, we're going on the information, the small window of time that we can see right now. But just think of how many things didn't exist only 20 years ago. There was no Facebook. There was none of those things that we count on right now were even in existence yet. So what could change in the next 10 years if the Lord doesn't come? I can't even imagine.
Excuse me, I had to cough there. So do you have, I look at this and I think, let me go here to some hope, because I think people get a little bit discouraged. You look at this. Listen, ultimately there is a rapture. The Bible's very clear. And the kingdom of Antichrist has a maximum shelf life of 7 years. That's like the shortest kingdom in the history of the world. And the real kingdom coming is Jesus Christ when he returns. And we have our hope. These things that we talk about, Joe, they're warning signs is what they are. Jesus said, look for these different things, for you know that your redemption is near. And that's really what we need to be focused on, is the hope that we have in Jesus, isn't it?
That is absolutely right. And to take it back to where we started at the beginning, if it all comes down to investment and you're trying to invest in something that's going to survive, what do you invest in? You invest in something that's eternal. And what is that? I'm going to invest my time and my talents and my knowledge and my experience and anything else that I can invest. I'm going to invest into the church and God's people and seeing as many people come to Christ as I can while I can.
Amen. Joe, thank you very much. I need to go. appreciate your prayers, everybody. I'm not going to be having as many videos going this week as normal. I hope you understand that. I'm hoping I'll be on with a couple of friends from Australia tomorrow here on the website and on the app. Joe, thank you very much. It's always wonderful having you on. We didn't even finish the 7 reasons. There's so much more to talk about. There's going to be a lot more between now and then. I can't wait to have you back.
Oh, happy to do it.
All right. God bless you, everybody. See you soon.